Декілька секунд тиші в пам'ять про тих, хто, на жаль, вже не знали. Телефон, будь ласка. That some reforms, like you implemented in Georgia, I also implemented. Look, I was in Ukraine after Orange Revolution. I was immediately in the aftermath, but then I came back after the formation of the government in 5 months' time. And I went to see the leadership of Ukraine. I not only saw Yushchenko, but all the ministers. And that was the moment when 5 days prior to me coming to Ukraine, they abolished state, the Державну адміністрацію and the road police. And actually, the day I arrived, they cancelled the decree that abolished DAI. But then I spoke to, when we went to some private yacht of one of the ministers there in Crimea, in Yalta. And which one? One of the, whatever. Is he a minister again now? No, not yet. So actually I was shocked to see these people, because these were very much old people, old mentality, and I thought that the reforms are over in that country, because the reason I thought so was that the first 5 to 6 months is decisive for any post-revolution reform process. If you don't do it fast, then you cannot do it at all. Like every day now is more valuable than maybe like a month or a year later. So that's the biggest thing to keep in mind, that time is very limited for Ukraine. And all the issues that we're talking about, they need to be dealt with within the next weeks to months. And it's not only just issue of expectations of people, which are to be managed, which are huge now. But the biggest issue is also right now territorial integrity of Ukraine. And in order for Ukraine to avoid problems for territorial integrity, I think Ukraine will keep territorial integrity, but to avoid problems in short term on territorial integrity, the only way to do it is to do past reforms. And that's really existential national security issue now, not just what people expect. And from that standpoint, I think several things should be implemented, because I think there is a kind of blurred situation now. For instance, what they're trying to, and I know many of you might also be saying that we need lustration, but lustration doesn't mean anything to me. It's an empty word. What is lustration? What you really need now is to do efficient anti-corruption reforms, to reform state administration, to get new faces into the government. You need to, for instance, GDP of Ukraine, when I became president, the GDP of Georgia per capita was twice as less than Ukraine. Now, I think Georgia is ahead of Ukraine. Now, this is not a normal situation. Ukraine has much bigger resources. But at the same time, the amount of wealth that is concentrated in Ukraine in the hands of people who relate to government, number of oligarchs that you have is amazing. Like, okay, Georgia had one oligarch creating problems, but you had much more. But it's also the amount of wealth that your elite had. It's despicable, outrageous. It's not. It's really, I used to tell Yushchenko, look, the number of expensive cars next to Verkhovna Rada, also under his administration, was a disaster. That meant that basically Ukraine, without real natural big resources, it was eating from its own national organism, and these people were cannibalizing their own national organism, right? So that needs to be tackled. I think one of the big things needs to be that to bring checks on government officials enriching themselves. For me, it's very important that I think the latest example of this grotesque thing, that relatives of presidents who are being enriched, is a big good lesson for any future governments to stay away from nepotism. You need laws on that, and laws can work. You need to reform immediately your law enforcement. Yesterday we were stopped on the road by road police, and they basically, until I started to kind of approach them and they got a little bit scared, they were trying to ask for bribe from, like, they told them Kadol now. If you, 3 days after president has fled, Державна адміністрація просить хабари, then it's really a bad thing. And that was my experience as well, that, we tried to scare them, frighten them, shout at them after revolution, and they did old ways. And then at a certain moment we said, go home, we are fed up. And so that's what you should do. But it's not only that. It's like whole public services, Georgia has this, Georgia, let's talk about benchmarks. Georgia is number 8 on World Bank list of doing business environment. Ukraine is 137. We have world's fastest customs procedure, world's fastest document ID issuance procedure, world's fastest customs procedure. We have the lowest corruption rate in Europe, or at least had under my administration according to the European Union, where we don't still have no new data, and we had the lowest crime rate in Europe. Now, Georgia has much worse starting positions than Ukraine. Much less cultivated class than Ukraine in many ways involved in politics. We just took leadership to do all those things. Now, when you ask me how can reforms be done in this country, I would say reforms not only can be done in this country and will be done in this country. Ukraine is of ideal size for reforms. So I'll tell you why. In Georgia, we had to fire 80% of civil servants. Now, it's a country of less than 5 million people. Now, you fire civil servants, and then you get your next door neighbor that was head of major agency and that hates you because he lost his job, right? I would say if you are a country of less than 1 million, it's impossible to reform it. If you're 5 million, okay, you can reform it, but with big loss. If you're 46 million, you are ideal to be reformed, because you can fire all of them and not meet them at all in your life. If you're 1 billion, and that's very important, because now it's not that the firing is not the main goal. The goal is to cut bureaucracy, to cut functions. We took big scissors, like for instance, we had fire inspection. We abolished fire inspection. Now, people were saying if you abolish fire inspection, there will be fires. Of course, it's rubbish, right? We'll know that, like the fire inspection is there to take bribes from restaurants, cafes, businesses. They don't care about fires. Sanitary inspection. Do you think any restaurant wants to poison people? Of course not. Sanitary inspection is there to go and if they check for cockroaches, if they're not to plant cockroaches and take money, or they don't have to plant anything, they will just take money. All kind of customs, difficult, complicated services. We fired all the customs officials and just put software there in place, and just young girls and boys that were there to smile, but they didn't have any discretion to decide what they had to do. So you really need to, there are all these things that, it's not about blueprint. You need a political will to do it. You don't need big know-how to do it. You need to want to know it, to want to do it. So that's doable in Ukraine. So from that standpoint, I think the good news now, with the difference with 2004, is that people know exactly what they want. In 2004, we had just general expectations, nice thing, but we never had real program. I remember I went with Yushchenko to Bukovel immediately in the aftermath of him getting elected president, and he was very, very sick. I have to give him to very sick. I mean, for like 5 days, I tried to take him to Kislob. It was impossible then, but I tried to even get him for like 7 minutes press event, to justify first place why I was there. Not just for having real fun, but we were also trying to discuss things, right? He couldn't even stand on his feet for 7 minutes to say things to press. He was really sick. I think that played bad role also in what happened later. But anyway, the reason I'm telling you, when I was with Bukovel, I was telling him, look at it. Once we went out for a few minutes to look at ski lift, and then he got sick and we got back again. But before we were, I told him, look at these young people, the smiles. This is such an euphoric, amazing energy there in this country. It's like an amazing nation. You just can't do anything from these people. Like they are just capable of doing miracles. Well, unfortunately, that was a failure most of the time. However, I would say that I don't consider Orange Revolution full failure, because I think that what the Orange Revolution really did was to bring the identity of Ukrainian nation front. What Orange Revolution really did, they created political infrastructure. There was much bigger civil sector, emerging media. You really, the Goldomor issue was very important. And even more, I'll tell you that the fact that Yanukovych got elected, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the man, but the main thing that came is that he brought all these Donetsk and Eastern people to Kiev. And that by itself played this role that, not only they couldn't radically change Kiev, Kiev in a way changed them. In a way, Kiev forced them to think in more centralized terms, that this is a one country. And that was very useful in some way, with all the bad things that we saw, especially last days, but in a way it was useful that they got themselves to be some kind of part of the United Ukrainian mechanism. So there were two stages that really, for all the reasons, were helpful. But now this third stage, Ukraine should become a modern, democratic, functioning, good state. You cannot have a modern state when you have prosecutor having golden house, right? I mean, I just don't get it, because if you have a golden house, and the guy, fled, as far as I know, fled to Russia, for him, wherever he builds his golden house, but Kivshina, that's your house, that's his house. He does have home, country, he just has his house. He is building his house today in Kiev, tomorrow he will build it in Moscow, or whatever it's called. And the problem is that you need people who will think it's not about I'm temporarily here and so thinking long term. I'm building our country. I mean, I have 2.5 hectares of vineyard. That's all I have left for my presence. But I can claim that my government has built at least several new, basically new cities in Georgia. Created thing, you know, we had 100,000 tourists when I got elected. Now we have 6 million. Our GDP grew in nominal terms 3 times. Our budget went up 12 times. There was a whole change of mentality. Of course, after a while, people get tired of any rule, especially the ones that does fast changes. And at that moment, you should say, okay, and give people a break. But the results are here. And of course, I don't have Swiss or offshore bank accounts, and my children, I cannot really guarantee that I will pay. I know that I can still pay for my son's next year's study for the university. Not sure about the year after.
Then Fulbrighter must be.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But the reality is that that doesn't matter. At least he can claim that my father did all this, and he can be on his own. People who get all this money, I don't understand their psyche, really. And you need now to get new generation of people who don't think it's just, you know, I can tell you, in Orange Revolution, I met a few businessmen, and then they told me, because they were friends from old times with me, with the university, they came once to my hotel. They were kind of important business people, and they said, look, we invested in Orange Revolution. We bought stock of Orange Revolution. Now we want to get back dividends. I said, what do you mean dividends? They said, people in the government, and we need government contracts. Well, if you think those terms, you cannot build your country. And that's the main thing that needs to be changed now. You know, and I fully understand what people on Maidan and collective Maidan of Ukraine feel. They feel that, you know, we did all this, not political leaders, we did it. It's true that these days, I know we contact each other for internet. Internet is everything. I mean, come on. You have 1 million people in the street, or here, or in Cairo, or in Sao Paulo, or in Istanbul. They are not there for leaders. They are there because you have 1 million of political leaders, political activists on their behalf, on their souls' behalf. So you don't tell this, and these people know exactly what they want. Change people. I mean, circumstances have changed dramatically in political terms, and so that's what we need to realize. And we know that you are afraid to be betrayed. We know that there is this awareness now. We know that nothing is over, because if it goes, you know, now people have perception in the street. I walk in the street, it's business as usual. And people don't want business as usual. And the point, and frankly, I watched Raja Rada yesterday morning. It's none of my business, but if I had been standing on my gun, I would have thought, well, it's business as usual. And that's not what people want to see, right? So that's the, and I understand this perception, but we should be patient, we should be in dialogue, we should be talking to each other. I don't think we should be overly aggressive or pushy. We should be pushy, but not like in a constructive manner, to make people know that you are there, out there, and they should be feeling your breath in their neck.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this. I'm sure you all have lots of questions now.
Always Ukrainian KGB said no. My dean would say outside, don't you know that you will never let, when I would carry this invitation to him, he said, come on, it's funny, go back into it, me. Anyway, so, so I would love to have, but look, these people, first of all, we couldn't do it because we didn't have these archives. Archives were taken by Russians in the 90s from Georgia. They were taken. Now, maybe Ukrainian SBO has archives because Ukrainians were more trusted by the Russians than Georgians. But these people are only told. I mean, the guy who denounced me, he still might be of my age. Okay, he was my classmate, but I know who he was anyway. And whatever. But I think the main thing still is to look forward. But to look forward, it also means that you should have strict laws, and you should have some kind of, you should take away money from mafiosi. I'm not a big backer of having, I mean, people who kill people should be in prison, but people who just stole money, I don't think they should be in prison, frankly. That was my philosophy in Georgia. You don't need to have mafiosi in prison with money and television stations outside prison. You would rather have mafiosi outside prison without money and without leverages to influence politics. That's more helpful for the society. But for that you need legal base, for that you need new clean structures. You know that you have tradition that your prosecutors and police were just commercial structures earning money or some kind of oligarchic structures. You need to end that. And that's why it's so important that people who, because there is a distribution of those ministries, and they shouldn't see it, okay, I get this ministry and I'll get more funds for presidential elections. That's the last thing you want to see. Somehow you should let them know that government is no longer a fundraising tool for any elections or any kind of activities.
EU initiative. Ukraine needs reinvention of the courts. As far as we understand that you can actually re-establish police just by firing and actually getting most of new police people. How do you deal with the courts? I mean, this requires way more skills than just police. I mean, how did you deal with that in Georgia? That's
first of all, but partially failed. What we managed to do is to have courts that were not corrupt. That we managed for sure, and I would say that, say, in civil cases, Georgian courts were not corrupt and government was not intervened. Where we didn't manage, that on administrative matters and criminal matters, they were really looking for prosecutor's office for guidance. And that was also, I guess, inertia of the past. But the way how we do is the following, and I think in the end we were almost there. We need another few years to do it. You appoint new people. You give them proper education, especially these people should be speaking foreign languages like you. It's very important because they shouldn't have know how foreign, just how general, how the standards work. And you give them high salaries and institutional guarantees of independence. That's what we all did. Now, we did all of this, but they were still not properly independent. But I would have said it would have taken us another several years for some young judges to defy prosecutors. Just say, to the hell with your instruction, we don't comply with it. And what would they do? Nothing. Because these people were not corrupt, they couldn't blackmail them, they couldn't really fire them. And that's the way to take it. Create institutional guarantees and wait. But also when you create institutional guarantees of independence, create small but very efficient anti-corruption body. The way how we managed to eradicate corruption is that we caught 36 judges within the first 4 years after the Rose Revolution, red-handed with bribe. Filmed on camera. Not just somebody said, he said, she said, no, camera, hidden camera. And it worked, they were all scared. They would not take bribes. Now that has the other side that they are all scared also to be kind of blackmailed, but then still have to, they should know that that's the only thing anti-corruption body does, catch for bribes. Otherwise they don't do anything. That's a very clear line to draw, because there is a temptation to say, okay, if you don't do something, I send you to the corruption body. But if government has this strong political interest to do it, it's doable, but it will be much less quick than police. The police, customs, they are easy fix. I mean, police is the easiest fix. Customs among those things are maybe the most difficult, but courts are impossible in short run. But you need to start.
Thank you.
Let's introduce. What was the percentage you changed, actually? Just quick.
Yeah.
What was the percentage of judges you changed?
Something like 60%. I wish we had changed more. I mean, frankly, if you want to know my opinion, you should fire all the judges here. Wow. And really get new ones. I mean, but it's very dangerous process at the same time. You fire them, but then you really need to be focused on creating, like, you know, in 90s, we did first judicial reform in Georgia in the 90s. I was young, very idealistic, 26 years old. We fired all the judges, appointed the others, all the new from judicial, for open exams, live television exams, gave them proper salaries, but didn't work. Because the problem was that all the other sectors were so corrupt, police, prosecutors, everything in the country, that in the end, first of all, they stopped to pay them salaries at certain moments. And then they were in such corrupt environment, so you just cannot limit it to judiciary. It was like toy they gave to us to play with because they thought judges were important, but they wouldn't allow us to touch prosecutors and police, or customs, or other states. So be aware of that. But so it's just, there is no blueprint. You need to reform everything. But judicial should be very important part of the big reform.
Thank you.
This revolution is all about, as we feel, breaking away finally from the Soviet nightmare. And it's about revival of national identity in a global contemporary setting, which is quite a complex story, taking into account especially how heterogeneous our society is. So did you have any special strategy related to kind of cultural revival of identity? If yes, which were the key points and priorities?
Well, I think the important thing, as I said, I thought that after Orange Revolution, some important things were started. I didn't go on the more things. Generally, awareness of history is much better now in Ukraine. History is a very important part. But mostly, I think it's very important to encourage young people to travel. I think Ukrainian youth is better off than Georgia, also for geographic reasons. Georgia is a landlocked country with no direct land connections to anywhere. Ukraine has these connections. But it's very important, for instance, like language studies. What we did invited 10,000 Americans within 3 years. So in Ukrainian terms, it would be like 90,000 to teach English. I mean, okay, you can do like 10,000–50,000 easily a year. It's not about big money, by the way. It's just, we just gave them pocket money. Families hosted them, and we just gave them to return tickets home. And lots of volunteers showed up. And there will be lots of, and that's a cultural change, because you bring to small rural areas an American to teach English, and then he or she transforms the whole culture of teaching, but generally brings their own culture there. And languages are very important and I think Ukrainian youth has been striving to learn this language, but you need much faster thing on that. Then you need to send lots of people abroad, and there need to be governmental programs to subsidize it. It's very important for any new revolution government to give new generation very fast. And anybody that, because people will also go abroad, like you yourself know, they have their different angle of look at their own country. They know much more about their own country. They can see many things much easier than people who just are their own juices here, and they just don't. So from that standpoint, that should be done. By the way, I did presidential program. We sent in Georgia, as I said, country 4.8 million, something like altogether for presidential programs. I think overall 7,000 or 8,000 people abroad, so together with other programs, but it was not enough. I really regret we didn't send like 100,000 of them. So from that standpoint, that would be my advice to this new government, to do that. Otherwise, I mean, there are many other things that you know better than me. I can just, give you my reading of what we've done and what we've done didn't correctly. If you ask me what's my biggest regret, that I didn't invest more in sending people abroad to study.
Ukrainian politicians now think what to do with this property. Should they be auctioned, all the important expensive items that are inside, or should they stay as resorts for children? What would be your
Let's
suggestion?
not focus on that much, because it's not about reforming Ukraine, but
Look, I mean, we tried it. We put a couple of them orphanages. Didn't really work. I don't know what you can do with it. I don't think you can do anything. Who will buy them for some time? So it will be very hard thing to. I think you just should seal them and live there as they are. I mean, that was my experience.
Thank you.
Now, do you believe that in order to implement all those reforms, we need to have parliamentary elections in May, together with the presidential elections?
Well, I think the main thing you need now is consensus to move on. I mean, we did first reforms with the old parliament. That was pretty hostile, but because it was post-revolutionary situation, they followed us. Now, it all can.
The same situation over here right now.
Yeah, it can also be that, but one thing you should know, that they will not follow forever. They will follow until people are their first signs of disappointment, and then of course they will capitalize on the disappointment. It's very clear. So after some time, of course you will need new elections. In first weeks and months, you shouldn't expect any resistance, because now everybody will be scared also to resist change. But then, as soon as they see first signs of discontent, they will be the first one to jump the wagon. You really need people who are committed to ideas, who are in a new wave, and who don't have Maybach cars standing waiting for them outside, and who will never have them by the outside once they get it. It's very important to understand. Because other things they will tell you, look, you know, these people at least already have money, and now we don't need new hungry people coming for money. No, we should change the rules of the game, and new ones will not be coming for money. I had my government and my people, and most of them are basically came with nothing, and almost all left with nothing. There were some exceptions. So that's what you need to create in this country. That public service is not for enrichment; it's a temporary thing for you. And you know, right now I teach in the U.S. and I do lots of free things, but also when I get really paid, and 80% of that get paid, I get paid more than I got for 1 month of presidential salary. But then at least I'm qualified to be paid, and I don't think most of these former plutocrats are qualified to do anything. So that's also the difference.
Thank you. Please, yes, go ahead, and then in the back.
Палаці Януковича, Пшонки і найбільше вразив Версаль, чи я не знаю, як це назвати, Юрія Єнаківського. Як би ви порекомендували от як у Грузії, що робили з цими палацами, з цими...
Я тільки що відповів, що я не знаю. Це дуже складно. Користуватися для інших благих цілей, я не певний, що це можливо. Залишити, як є.
Що там розміщали? Там міністерські якісь будівлі, лікарні, все це?
Пару урядних інститутів, наприклад, інститут боротьби супроти мафії у Палаці, в законі, але це було достатньо складно користуватися цими будинками.
Where we are, how we can push to force the government to launch social lifts, to really get people like us who studied involved, or we have to wait until they fail. What we should do, that's one part of the question. Another is, as we will cut functions of the government, what should we do for the empowerment of local self-governance, of people who will have to undertake some effort to govern themselves somehow, and many are
My
ready.
experience is that local self-government, more local self-government is always more efficient than more centralized government, that's for sure. But there are also dark side of local government, but usually more, with more democracy there is more corruption, more kind of flexibility in them for doing local contract and things. So that you need both. You need to empower them, but you need to have strong centralized anti-corruption, small but efficient service to go after that. How do you force the government? How you force the government out now? I mean, any future government will know these lessons. I don't think they will be in position to ignore your opinion. Simply you need to be always civil, have all these civil activists. Remember today this government, bring as many Facebook people, my advice to you, as you can to the government, as many Facebook and tweeting people as you can, because they are accountable on a daily basis. People, especially dangerous, are people who don't know. I'm sure Yanukovych never looked at Facebook, right? And he was sure that he has this 1 or 2 television channels, and they are like safely on his side, and they could sell just any reality to people, and totally ignoring there is another part that people who know Facebook, they are much more accountable. They are there on a daily basis. You know, I'm glued to my iPad. I'm like, I'm all the time curious what's happening there, and then it's like almost a masochism if you're in politics to look at that. But then it works because it's another way of democracy. You are in daily battle for survival, and then you are much more careful to do crazy things.
So you don't know how to make them launch the social lifts, social elevators, or whatever.
Well, the main thing in my country was that we tried to introduce meritocratic system, which basically meant that we were very much worried that our relatives should not have been promoted or anywhere in public service. That nepotism was an absolute must, that she should not have been there. For me, sign of democracy is not whether people can speak or not. That's one of the attributes of musts. For me, real democracies are the places where the biggest social mobility exists. And why the United States is so successful, or has been successful traditionally, is that they are a country with great social mobility. Like you, I was Muskie Fellow, then I started to study for a law firm, And what I learned that in 3 years' time, I forgot that I was a foreigner. I thought everything was possible in this country. I was working for a top law firm, and I was thinking maybe I should take US citizenship around from Congress. And you know, in that country you have this feeling you can do it, that you can do it fast. And that's what you need to create in this country, because the problem is that, and that's what you need because this new generation needs to go up. The problem is that, and now we talk about let's have like immediately somebody from the president or somebody new. It will be very hard because frankly, you know, you cannot take people out of the blue without any experience, let's say like they make president, because it also might turn into a total disaster, let's put it this way. You need balance, golden middle between those two. You need people with experience, but you need people who have new view and something, outlook of how this thing should be changed. Both of them. I don't know how you combine it, you know it better. But certainly these things can be done. And from that, but at every other level. You know, in Georgia, 80% of our public service was under 30. And there was very important that nobody's relative was rich or nobody's relative was in public service there. There was like very thing. I started with my own relatives. It was a hard thing. Now, initially when we started, I'll tell you, I mean, there were lots of people approaching my relatives and telling me, why don't you give you a share in this company and that company? Because my predecessor was doing that. It was a way for people to protect. It's like if we had not done something proactively, me concretely, they would have enriched themselves without me even knowing about it. It's like people have this habit to do this. And in the society, new government, unless it really hammers them, they will do this automatically. You know, somebody he owns like Ukrainian big businesses. Next day, these guys will come to new ministers, new president or prime minister, say, okay, or not even to them, to their son, children, cousins, and say, okay, we'll give you this share that was owned by son of Yanukovych, for instance. So, but they will almost automatically do that. So you not only need government that doesn't want to do it, you need government that wants to force them not to allow them. That's a big difference. And I had big trouble. I mean, I was not on speaking terms with most of my relatives, especially in Georgia has this family and clan or whatever tradition. But we managed to do it. It took me 2 or 3 years for everybody to understand that if you are related to me, not only it's not an advantage, it's a big handicap, because I will learn about it and get very angry. But here it will be also very complicated.
Thank you.
You mentioned that the next week and next 2 months are really critical.
Yeah.
We observe how Maidan as an organism is changing. After Yanukovych fled, it lost its one target, and now it kind of in a search for a new unifying goal. Maybe from your experience, from your refreshed views, from your analysis of the current situation, what this one goal should be?
This one goal should be, now you need short-term goals. Short-term goal is to change law enforcement, raise tax collection. You know, when we became to rule the country, our budget was much more empty than Ukraine's budget is now. Nobody was paid, and nobody was giving us real money. So we told us, and now maybe you'll get this back. But first thing, and I'm not so sure, by the way, frankly, whether it's good or not that you get this one. Because money can make you a little bit lazy. It's important to get some money. It's very important not to get too much money, which I hope Europeans will not do anyway. But because the reality is very clear. We got some money from UNDP to pay first salaries to tax officials and anti-corruption investigators, maybe 200 people or 300 people, plus members of parliament, plus ministers. Altogether, maybe 1,000 people. We started to pay like 300, 400, 500. At that moment, it was big money. Now, but then we were saying, if we could raise tax collection, say, first 6 months, for the first year we thought, by 30%, it would have been a major success. Well, within 6 months, we doubled tax collection. And we start basically, we're pulling ourselves from the mud with our shoestrings. So it's very important that some initial money comes, because you need to avoid default, you need to avoid like major devaluation of currency. Some kind of devaluation will happen for sure, much more than even now. So anybody who has money in hryvnias be aware of that. But at certain moment you need to pick up pace at your own, you know, and that will unify. If they see immediate results, then they will follow more and more and more. Ukrainians are people who can be much more impressed, much more easily impressed than Georgians, frankly. Because it's like open-minded, curious, euphoric, nice people and hardworking people. The main feature of Ukrainians, from my standpoint, you are hardworking. Because you are hardworking, you can immediately grasp the results of other people's works, even if these people are government. And so from that standpoint, I think government can easily achieve real support. In short, long, medium term, or long term, no government can achieve too much support by doing fast deliverables on corruption, tax collection, law enforcement, on major things that concern people, so that people immediately see the difference. And you don't do it just for changing people. You know, I heard today they fired head of road police. You can fire 20 next heads of road police, it will still be the same road police. Yeah. That does work this way. The system, the way it is, cannot work.
Green Incubator and Народный Hospital,
Yes.
doctor support group. One of the amazing results of your reform is the really streamlined and like easy to handle system of licensing, of government interaction. So, and we have it really bloated here, overloaded, very inefficient. Where did you find the architect for that system? How did you hire them and how did you retain them?
Strangely so, the main architect of this system, I mean, besides my young team, one of the main architects was Bela Varun of Russian oligarchs, Bedukidze, if you know, because he basically was a Russian oligarch, but very poor one. He didn't have even 1 billion. But he was all the time like very outspoken in Russia, like all the time on television. So he's a big man, and it's hard not to notice him. And you know, but he was kind of like mainstream Russian guy. But at the very beginning, when I first spoke to Putin sent all his oligarchs to Georgia, but he was one of them to arrive with the big group. I didn't really like the others, obviously, but most of them, by the way, are still of Ukrainian origin. But this guy was really interesting because he had very radical, strange ideas about how things should be done. So we asked him to stay as Minister of Economy. Many people, my people say, wow, this guy is, you know, Russian oligarch, right? You understand Russian? I said, let's try. And he basically, but of course he's of Georgian origin, but he was very good at cutting this regulation. He's like, has instinctive hatred for any government regulation. And sometimes it was too much even from my standpoint. Like for instance, he would say why it was too much. For instance, we had horrible buildings in the center of Tbilisi. And we wanted to get them demolished. All of them were on illegal lands, we did no permits, so we wanted to build nice capital. He would say, no, market takes care of it. We don't manage. Well, I don't share that. And I'm lucky, I hope I was right not to believe it, and we rebuilt our cities from the scratch very nicely, because I didn't believe him. But on most other things, he was right. Like, you know, we abolished this agency, like we said, we had some agency, like standards, ghost standard. What the hell is ghost standard doing? But every month, this ghost standard would get bribes from different other agencies for just seals and signatures. And by the way, you know, we should be aware that the European Union will be a trap in that respect. European Union has lots of other assets, but the problem will be with the European Union that they have this catchword, lack of institutional capacity. In our case, they applied it very importantly because what it means, some Euro bureaucrat comes to you and says, you know, I have this function, right? Who is in your country doing this function? And in our country, the people who are doing these functions are usually corrupt, bad people. And usually we abolish most of these functions. They say, oh, you don't have this function, then you have a lack of, you don't have anti-monopoly agency, oh, very bad. What is anti-monopoly agency doing? What is the function? It's basically a way, instrument for some people to establish monopolies, right? So from that standpoint, there will be this problem, but okay, this is one of the shortcomings of Brussels, but and you'll be fully aware of that. But otherwise, as I said, we took these big scissors and cut regulations. Then these regulations, it's like hair, it grows back. Then you have again take scissors and cut it back. Because every bureaucracy wants to expand. They have this things and right? So, but it's an ongoing process. But once you learn it, how good it is, then you're aware of that. You should be like cracked down. Now, like for instance, we have new government. And I hear on television things like, big news, new government agency on sanitary whatever, confiscated 5 tons of rotten kalbasa. Wow. people should be very happy. We are scared of, but I know what it is. It's rubbish, bullshit. What is some government agency going to shops and confiscating sausage? That's corruption, if you ask me. And that's how, I mean, basically people, when they see on television, they think, oh, it's right, our children doing rotten sausage. But from me, no, I know what it is, basically. What it really means that tomorrow we'll have higher prices and much worse quality of everything. Because that's what basically this agency, by the 1 or 2 times they can really do rotten things, and third time they'll just go for cash. That's how these things work in our systems. We need to get rid of this.
From the Institute of International
Yes, yes, yes.
Couldn't you compare Putin-Russia's policy about Georgia and about Ukraine, and what should be done to avoid the new Abkhazia and Crimea?
Well, it was very similar, but look, remember what happened here. Abkhazia and self-Ossetia really happened in the 90s. What happened in 2008 was something else. You know, they had the factor control already. When we started really fast reforms, they tried to stir up trouble in Adjara and up South Georgia. Georgia is a small country, but it has all these different regions. There are Armenian inhabited regions and Adjara is Muslim Georgian autonomy. And what happened that we were already doing such fast reforms that we managed to totally neutralize Russian things there. Like totally, it's gone. Like any hint of separate is gone. We tried to do the same thing in South Ossetia. The reason why war started in South Ossetia is that we recruited former South Ossetian, or not recruited, somehow attracted them, former South Ossetian separatists, those that were shooting at my government's police in 2004. We told them it's your country, we will empower you, we will give you maximum autonomy, we will really not meddle, you'll be part of the development. They believed us. And in the end, Russia had no other choice left but to bring in troops to stir up trouble. But they could bring troops in Georgia because Georgia is small. I don't think they can really seriously, large-scale attack Ukraine. And that's the advantage you have. I think my recipe for Crimea, first of all, next 3 weeks or 3-4 weeks will be decisive. It's a very dangerous period. But in little bit medium-term recipe is fast reforms, because when you have fast reforms, people, I don't think people in Lugansk and Donetsk are going to follow them now, but people in Crimea also will follow you if they see real advantage. Now, what they see now was that they had oligarchic, corrupt Putinian model big time applied by Yanukovych, and you had the same model in Russia. So if you choose between Ukrainian oligarchic model and Russian oligarchic model, maybe they would choose Russia. If you have to choose between like normal country and Russia, most of the Russians will choose Ukraine, I'm not talking about Crimea. So that's the whole beauty, because also, you know, soft power that you will yield. Georgia had soft power over Russia after the war. Immediately in 2009, 2008, it was amazing. It was amazing how, like, Russian intellectuals, middle-class people from... I initiated one-sided abolition of visa regime with Russia. We had a very strict visa regime with Russia. No Georgians would be allowed in, and no Russians would be allowed into Georgia. Then I said, okay, after the war, let's open it. Let's allow in every Russian. People were saying I was crazy. Would that do to have security issue? All these Russian spies will invade us. I said, precisely because of security, we should allow them to come. Because more of them will come, more it will be difficult to continue aggression. And then we got like 1 million Russians a year, mostly middle class from St. Petersburg, Moscow, and then they would go back and they could tell them, or Noerte as many times as they would tell them that we are just eating children, but they wouldn't take it. So, and that's the reason I'm telling you, Georgia was yielding soft power of Russia. Imagine if Ukraine is successful. I mean, it's not only just that they would no longer be able to manipulate Crimea. Russia, like Moscow and Petersburg, the other place where Russia will change so much. If Kiev is really successful, modern European place, which it might be in maximum 2 years, if it goes all right. Can you imagine what kind of example it is for ordinary Russians? First of all, you know, I remember in the aftermath of the revolution, all of them were coming here, Orange Revolution, and like it was a fashion among Muscovites to come here for a weekend, just to enjoy another kind of country. Then things got bad in Ukraine, and it like faded away. Now it again will come back. Especially with, now Russia is much worse than it was back then, and the atmosphere is not so good, and he'll get more and more paranoid, Putin. He's approaching the end of his existence because everybody has his own political... You cannot be ruling unchallenged any country in 21st century for 20 years. just doesn't work. It's political mechanics. Putin knows it instinctively. People are saying, also some of my Russian friends, oh no, Russian people are different, or no, they were. Whereas most of my friends in Ukraine telling me 2 years ago, people are resigned to what's happening in Ukraine and Yanukovych is going to win next elections, because people are just cynical and they don't want to, they're fed up with everything, and especially after this Orange Revolution, nothing is going to change. It's even if, okay, I would say that Russians are more, because of this imperial idea, more willing to accept some of the things. Still, one-man rule for more than 20 years is not doable anywhere. Even Tsars could not hold very well. So, 21st century internet age, people are fed up. What's Russia's national idea? Competition with the West. People are like, especially their elites, hate it. Restoration of Soviet Union. Now that they lost Ukraine, what will be the restoration of Soviet Union? From Russian nationalist view. Because, like, this history of nationalists, because we are restoring Soviet Union. Now they lost Ukraine. Suddenly discovered it's another nation. So who is left? Uzbeks, Tajiks, and all the other Muslims that would come and take over Russia, right? Different stance. And so from Russia's nationalists, it's an appalling nightmare. So not a good idea. And so, and then what? What is left? The first two major ideas are out. Orthodoxy, okay, but in short term, when you basically, even to tell middle class there in Russia, which is more will dictate the way you live, it's very hypercritical, right? You can tell them as many times as you want that West is all about gay rights and all this bullshit, but they don't buy it too long. So what's left? Putin's personality. It worked for a while. Flying Putin, naked Putin, this Putin, that Putin, striving Putin. Come on, they're very nice relations people might have, but they're getting fed up with their family members and their boyfriends and girlfriends, right? You cannot be in love with your ruler for 20 years. It's human span, and the relationship lasts for some time. And when you establish this kind of personal relation with your subjects, and there is nobody else in your politics, then it becomes like basically kind of love-hate relationship and cannot last forever. So he is really in trouble. And from that standpoint, it's really end of his spine. 2008 it was different, because 2008 the oil prices were the highest. Russia was having amazing oil and gas income. They felt that everything is in their hands and they could do just anything.
Охоронної системи, тому що, мені здається, зараз ніхто не знає, що з цим зробити. Йдуть просто призначення якихось людей ніби лояльних, і реформування як такого поки що не робиться. Якщо швидко не буде результатів, люди будуть відчувати дуже таке велике розчарування. І друге питання, ви знаєте, яка ситуація в країні, ваші рекомендації, і громадськість говорить про те, що має бути якась люстрація. Які саме принципи люстрації можуть бути застосовані в Україні? Чи як ви це бачите?
Правоохоронне.
По-перше, треба реформувати радикально цю систему правоохоронних органів, припинити діяльність державної автоінспекції. Треба скасувати державну автоінспекцію.
Ми зробили заяву таку.
Автоматично. Треба створити патрульну поліцію, яка буде як нормальна поліція, патрулюючи вулиці для підтримки суспільного порядку. І надати добрі кошти для цієї нової поліції, але треба також замінити, повністю поміняти личний состав, потому что я не верю, что старые люди могут реформироваться. Это очень легко их поменять. Много людей. Набрать новых на хорошую зарплату, допустим, $1000 в месяц. Мы давали им, когда у нас вообще не было денег, от 1000 до 2000, 3000. Сейчас у Европейского Союза можно взять. Если там 7000 евро в месяц, допустим, и хороший контроль нести, хорошее обмундирование, действительно современное, действительно самые быстрые, хорошие машины. И главное гордость вообще, что мы еще там пропаганду заказали на целом ряде телевидения, просто ежедневное шоу про полицию, клипы про полицию. И у нас доверие полиции выросло, полиция выросла с 4% до 90%. Их просто начали любить. А полиции раньше люди боялись, а потом появились истории, типа как там кого-то там, кто-то забыл ключ там у дома, и потом полицейский поехал там с ним вместе, там в другой конец города забыл ключ, привез, открыл его. Второе там это самое, девочка и мальчик дрались где-то там, и мальчик бросил девочку в речку, полиция пришла, обоих собрала, запутала их, подела и примирила. Ну, я говорю, это история. И эти истории стали размножаться быстро. И просто полицию стали любить. И это быстро можно сделать, потому что это, на самом деле ничего сложного в реформировании этого органа нет. Это просто политическая воля. И почему-то я просто даже для властей непонятно, зачем им нужна, чтобы была полиция такая. Понятно, для Януковича чем нужна. Они в конце ГАИ, меня удивило, что они действительно перекрыли дороги, в том числе для Автомайдана. Я думаю, что они просто инстинктивно чувствуют, что там конец придет, если. Но в конце концов, когда их уволят, избавят от этой унижающей, унизительной функции выбивать деньги своих сограждан, они сами будут счастливы, я уверен.
Yeah, no, we do know.
We do already
We
know,
do know
yeah.
we're collaborating with old people. They're still in yesterday and today, and they're going to do this next all 5 years or forever. They actually do not have an emotional investment in our country. They do not have a Kuchina in their heart, and they are very similar.
But they have
to
it in their
Russia.
party name.
Maybe, but we now cannot influence on them. We can stand near Russia, near Rada, and fight and bring some political, I don't know.
Look, I think you can influence them, frankly, much more than you could ever before. And you should try.
How?
How? Like a lower.
Speak out. First of all, now I think Ukrainian media will be more free than ever now, because they still don't know under whom to go. So they're looking
We are
desperate.
owner of our
Yeah,
press,
obvious.
so
We know.
we just need some laws or some
Громадское
NGOs.
телевидение was like, I don't think only just NGO laws will do the thing. The thing what will do civic activism, Facebook activism, this kind of independent television station as activism. What you really need to do is to, frankly, I don't think the game of having old game back will work. They will try it, I agree. They are already trying it perhaps. Now, I don't think it's going to work. It will just create turbulence. It will create a trouble for the people who try to do it. I don't think not only you, I don't think society or world now in Ukraine will accept this. Society is waiting for something else. People on Maidan, in the end, there were like maybe a few thousand fighting, but it was whole Ukraine with them, at least 80%, I would say. And that's really people with new united mindset that they for sure have allergy for old things. And old things is not just old faces, old way of doing things. They will immediately detect when they see old way. You can get new faces, and they'll might start to do. I still have these old oligarchs in my head, as I told you. They told us we've invested in this revolution. You know what? The difference was Orange Revolution was frankly very well organized, but you know, like good pants, musical groups, like supplies, television coverage. Lots of money was put overall in good organization. Rose Revolution was done without money. But somebody put this money from local businessmen, but then many of them start to say, okay, we put money, now we get it back through the government, right? We were lucky in Georgia, nobody gave us money, we didn't go and forget to anybody. I think this revolution doesn't really owe money. Okay, there were some people maybe giving money to feed people on Maidan, but it was so unprepared. I saw it firsthand, so chaotic, and it's the beauty of that. Right now, really, nobody owes anything to anybody, especially also to the leaders, because it was the leaders this time, it was the people who did it, right? So I think you have really moral advantage. You can always say, oh, what can we do? You can do miracles. And you will show them that you can do miracles. Maybe they don't think you can, but you will. Because there is a new generation that knows how to not only be manipulated by the government, not to be manipulated by the government, but how to influence and maybe even manipulate the government if you want. I'm sure you'll just try. I don't know how, frankly, like this, use this device a lot. and there will be more and more of that. And
all like this one?
well, I mean, I mean that's anything like that. And so from that standpoint, I think there is a perspective.
And actually, a few months ago, my boss Saakashvili and some other EU politicians have got medals from you. I would like what I see.
Nice guy. He really was like really standing up for Ukraine.
Well, he's really standing also very much for Ukraine as well as for Georgia.
Yeah, sure.
I would like to ask what exactly can we anticipate now from the EU? Should we continue pressing them and lobbying for the targeted sanctions?
Look, you should realize one thing. And you know all these things like, I saw the other day article by Brzezinski, Finlandization of Ukraine. Brzezinski is Polish. And there are many different interests in Europe. And not every interest, and there are a lot, I mean, Poland is a country which Ukraine well, I'm sure so, but not every politician all around Europe wants Ukraine to, you know, some people don't want Ukrainian because they think that they can prop out money from Russia, why they have the profit in Ukraine. That's one motivation. The others might be jealous that Ukraine got too powerful too fast because of resources and population size. The others will just want to, you know, to divert resources to southern and east, western flanks of Europe, not rather than to the eastern part. So there are many materials why people would not want Ukraine very fast in the EU. And that's what I was trying to explain to my Ukrainian friends. That be aware that there are like multiple interests here. Now, in the end, Europe actually, I still acted very fast. I still thought the deal they made was not good, but the step they took to give sanctions was decisive. Because that was the turning moment where basically people started to defect around Yanukovych. And so from that standpoint, they did absolutely right thing, and it really worked. I had big debate. Me and Klitschko and Poroshenko, we sat with 7 or 8 European ministers in Munich in January. And they were saying, you should understand, we can manage with sanctions, but in any moment we introduce them, then Yanukovych will understand where it not really means much, and you know, then it will backfire, so we should manage, but we shouldn't do it. And we were telling them, no, do, please do it. In there they had to do it, and they didn't have time not to understand whether it works or not. They fled. And so, from that standpoint, we were right and they were wrong. But so there, it's not always that Europe will always do right. As Churchill rightly said about democracy, they'll try all the bad things before they wrong things before they do the right things. That's how Europe is. But in the end, that's the reality is that Poland lives very well, and Ukraine doesn't live well. When Poland had much less GDP, 2.5 times I think less in the early 90s than Ukraine. What it tells me is that the European Union is good at distributing money to its citizens. So when we're talking, oh, you know, Russia will come up with 15 million and Europe has no money. Russia could come up with 150 million and Ukraine would get everything from it. The Russians don't know how to distribute money or corrupt officials locally. Europe might not give much cash, but Europe will give another system where people can succeed more. I would say the European system is not also ideal, but I would say in that respect, Americans have more openness, but we live in Europe, not in America. And here is still the best model is the European Union, very clear. So from that standpoint, what could be done? Fast membership, and it's doable. I think if things go smoothly, then it will be very hard to ignore Ukraine. For instance, like Klitschko. Klitschko in Germany is a very big superstar, we all know it. Germans love him. Germans love him because I think I was trying to explain why, because he is very modest. And for Germans, somebody from Eastern Europe who with so much money as he earned there, should be driving around with golden Rolls Royce and should be having on his wrist $1 million watch, and Klitschko who lives in modest, more or less, house and just has modest lifestyle. And for Germans and for his Calvinist culture, it's something that, yeah, you see, this guy is like us. So somebody like him has maybe not less leverage in Germany than Chancellor on this particular issue of Ukraine. So you should you have lots of soft power like this. This girl that filmed this, whoever did it, you know, I'm Ukrainian, had amazing appeal in Europe. you know, Ukraine has so many things to which it can appeal in short way to overrule the politicians. Because my safe bet would be that the first instinct of politicians in Europe would be to sideline Ukraine. Okay, now we helped you, now we give you cash, but stay away. But then you have lots of leverages to appeal over their heads to public and say, we are like you, we shouldn't be left out in the cold. We should be, and I think it will work. You know, of course, they will have first instinct they will have towards you will be the same they have towards Turkey. No way, no. We're too big, too dark. But Ukraine can appeal much better, and I'm sure it will. And we have self-interest in that because once Ukraine does, then small countries like us also will benefit a lot.
What can you say us about the perils of Tymoshenko? How she is dangerous? What is the perils? And how is she dangerous for Ukraine? Or maybe she is a miracle for Ukraine? And you know, she is like old generation and all this.
You cannot take people out of the blue. You need people with some experience. To disqualify anybody just on the thing that they are old, I think it's basically wrong. I'm not talking about Tymoshenko, but many people say, oh, we don't want her or the others because they're old. By itself, it doesn't mean decisive factor. But there are many other things to look at. Whether a person has values, whether a person has showed principles in the past, whether they are committed really to the Ukrainian ideals or might flip-flop on the core things for Ukraine. How clean they are on corruption and how sensitive they are to these kind of things. There are many things to be applied. And that's it. I think she's formidably talented. Don't underestimate her. She's really talented. I think she's also very much part of democratic culture in a way because I watch her a lot at People Party's meetings. She really feels at home it is with European politicians. She can. I mean, Yanukovych was like it was like coming from Stone Age to. Yulia is different. You know, she might. Lots of people might think, oh, but there in Europe, she was one of them. Don't underestimate this factor. She was one of them. So lots of people here say, oh, they're all the same. Not for that audience. So there are lots of nuances to be taken into account there. So when you approach somebody, don't simplify things. I understand your emotions, this or the other way, but you should be aware of what you are dealing. You know, and you know as well as I do that, for instance, lots of European Parliament members have her pictures still in their offices, because of her hair, because of her, but she's out there as a brand. Now, what happened when she's out now, the first wave was, oh, this is like new thing, and then second, third day already, skeptical articles started. So it's not clear-cut as well, internationally. But ultimately, I think it's up to new Ukrainians to decide things. I think they've learned lots of lessons. I think they've seen lots of bad things and disappointments. I think your voice will be decisive because moral advantage now, you have it. Simply, we have 3 months of campaign ahead. And I tell all of them, because I still talk to all, and there is already competition, there is something big secret, there's already competition, and politicians are fighting for power now. I'm warning all of them that don't underestimate each other, because 3 months is too long for such a turbulent period. And fortunes can be gained and lost in 1 week here. And whoever is a good campaigner might be very successful. People might just get voted in by default. How was Yanukovych voted in last time? By default. There was there's nothing to choose from for many people. People were disappointed. Orange was fighting with each other. There was a clear split. They sided with the other side, some of them. And so in the end, like when you have I remember like few days before elections, people were still not decided. And then they said, okay, out of the 2 bad things or 3 bad things, maybe we choose maybe this time, right? So. Good new thing about these elections is, for the first time, by the way, that Eastern Ukraine will not be like separate camp in elections. That's huge. It's first time. I mean, the Kuchma election was a little different, but for this time, since like real kind of democratic structure got introduced to Ukraine, when East Ukraine is not like separate election block. That's an amazing chance for Ukraine to get unified. And so from that stand, and Yanukovych helped you again in that respect, that he screwed up so badly that basically he annihilated the whole segment of this regional division of Ukraine. Now, it's gone. Now, how you act now? I think this is a unique chance on that one. I think that because of this factor, there will be lots of unexpected things in these elections, because we don't know how Easterners will vote. There will be many surprise factors coming in. So it's a clear, very open race now. And there will be lots of things. But again, as I said, I know now Moody's there are. This can never make it, or he can never make it, or he can, or he's too weak. We don't know. 3 months is too long. Everything can change, everything can happen. So be aware of it and be very vigilant.
Mr. President, Maxim Prasola from Spilno Bachina, Civil Channel.
Yeah.
So I have one question. How do you think, is it perspective to, as you know, a lot of huge numbers of money was removed from country and now saving in European banks and banks all over the world. What do you think, is it possible to return this money to Ukraine? Because as we know, a lot of money laundering process was in Ukraine, and now we have an amount about 2 state budget. This is in the same moment they're providing us the loan and the debts, and we think that it may be not okay for us because we already in a hot situation. So what do you think? Is it perspective to return money to the people of Ukraine from the account of criminal junta of Yanukovych? Thank you.
Well, it's hard to speculate how much they will have abroad, frankly, because I also noticed that they also wanted to have golden houses, so and lots of cars and lots of other things, and they all cost money. So it's not so simple. Some of these old Soviet mentality people, of course, they like to keep money, but also want to invest it in what they can see rather than just in virtual accounts. Then it's not also so clear that it's all in European banks. Because as far as I was understanding, I heard that it's not a rumor, I think it's confirmed information from good sources, that basically some members of the family of Yanukovych went to the United Arab Emirates and other financial heaven. So we don't know what is the access of Europeans or the other or Americans for those ones. And that's another thing to be taken into account. But part can be recovered. I think a smaller part can be recovered. A bigger part cannot be kept by them. Maybe it will just be kept by banks, I don't know. But I think the main thing is to create a system where nobody else dares to do it. That would be easier than it could be a long, long procedure. You know, in case of many other countries, it took decades, and sometimes it never happened. And today, everybody will say, "Oh, we'll help you, we'll help you." There are much better instruments now. But in the end, I would be not too much expecting from that to really happen, frankly.
Which is dealing with the injured people, with the lost people during Euromaidan events. And I want to ask you, because our great concern is the proper investigation of all those awful things which happened on Maidan and on all these areas. So can you recommend us, please, any instruments on the national level and on the international level? How can we force that investigations? And another thing is maybe you can also mention this point during your meetings with people who are now presenting new Ukrainian government.
But how many people have disappeared?
At the moment, it's about 200 people, which are
290.
290. Yes, and they can be anywhere. I mean, in hospitals and wherever.
Well, there's a good experience of that of a number of Latin American countries. The very good expertise accumulated on this disappeared missing people. I didn't expect numbers to be that big, frankly. But yeah, I mean, you should study very carefully Argentine experience, some other Latin American countries' experience. I still think it's easier. I don't think you can really. I mean, I remember the story with, obviously, classical stories with my compatriot Mongadze, and it looks like it's a pattern of behavior in Ukraine because we had this replicate over and over again, taking out people to forests and. Whatever is macabre, old tradition is of some crazy people to do this thing. things. So there is Ukrainian specifics. The Argentinians would dump people from the plains into sea. Ukrainian thugs dump them in the forest. And sometimes with separated body parts. And yeah, so it's Latin American experience. Try to invite foreign experts for forensics, and you can do it.
And the answers could be understandable by Russian people, because I'll talk also about one of journalists in Russia. Давайте промоделируем ситуацию. Проведена отличная реформа в Украине. Проходит 5 лет, новые выборы. И выигрывает снова тот, кто обещает неисполнимые вещи. И можно ответить на этот вопрос там, с разных точек зрения, что происходит. Один из ваших сторонников России, журналистка Латынина, говорит о том, что проигрыш в таких странах, как Грузия и Украина, запрограммирован в том, что это бедные страны, у которых население голосует за тех, кто больше обещает, а не больше делает. Прокомментируйте, пожалуйста.
Да, ну, надо понимать, что в вашем случае в Украине и была демократия, не было в том смысле, что это был баланс олигархов. Несколько десятков олигархов балансировали друг друга средством масс-медиа, фракции в парламенте, видимыми, невидимыми нитями, которые у них были в руках. В Грузии нам не повезло, что у нас был один олигарх, тот российский. В Украине где-то несколько десятков, в принципе, почти все украинские. Это уже большой прорыв патриотический. Но с другой стороны, в Украине не было таких случаев, что имеется олигархов. То есть это люди, которые просто каннибализируют национальный организм Украины. И в этом смысле, конечно, деолигархизация Украины гораздо более важна, чем так называемая иллюстрация. И я смотрю, что некоторые там люди связаны с олигархом, все равно говорят иллюстрация, потому что это что чего нельзя никогда потрогать. Я думаю, что баланс будет держать народ, а не олигархи. Каким-то образом нужно сделать такую экономику, где олигархи потеряют позиции. Это очень важно. Во-вторых, нужно понимать, что, конечно, через какое-то время люди устают от реформаторов. И я раньше так говорю, что там был пример Бацеровича или там Мазовецкого Польши. Хотя реформы были, правда, непопулярны. В Грузии мы сделали реформы, которые были супер популярны. В любом случае, популярно или непопулярно, все равно люди остаются. Потому что чем быстрее изменения, тем потом, потому что общество всегда более консервативно каким-то образом. И людей, которые в любом случае, любая реформа кого-то обижает. Не кого-то, а много людей. Те, которых ты обижаешь, они помнят. Народ это ценит там 3 месяца, 6 месяцев, потом они переключатся на другие вещи, потом сразу. А те, которые помнят, те помнят долго. И потом, и это неизбежно. А что сделать? А что, из-за этого вообще ничего не делать? Конечно, надо делать. И, конечно, через какое-то время пройдет. Но вот в Грузии пришло правительство, которое ненавидело все, что мы делали. И они пришли под лозунгом не только что разрушим институты, и там всех пересадим, разрушим здания. У нас была потрясающая новая желтая такая стеклянная архитектура, одна из лучших в мире, наверное, такая для такой бедной страны, как Грузия, это просто было чудо, что мы сделали. А у них был длинный список зданий, которых нужно было разрушить. Причем они об этом каждый день говорили по телевизору, это не выдумано. Они пришли, ничего не тронули. Ну там несколько человек, я думаю, что совершенно несправедливо посадили, но не смогли тронуть основные институты, не смогли, не говоря уже о зданиях. Ничего, в принципе, потому что люди привыкли к ним, в принципе, как бы они их не критиковали, они их ценят. И как только ты им скажешь, что паспорт ты будешь получать вместо там, 7 минут, там, 7 дней, он этого не примет. Он за тебя голосовал, потому что ты пришел, ты ему обещал бесплатно его покормить. И люди должны на своем опыте убедиться, that there is no free lunch, right? Никто бесплатно не кормит. Но это убедиться, это опыт с опыта приходит. Я думаю, что сколько бы правительство ему не рассказывало, вот это хорошо, это плохо, пока они сами своими глазами не увидят, что сейчас у нас хороший пример прививки. Но с другой стороны, если институты они не тронут, они не смогут тронуть, уже это очевидно. История никогда так не поднимается по восходящей, она с таким зигзагом. Но главное, чтобы следующий зигзаг не очень низко начинался, что на каком-то уровне оставить, чуть-чуть вниз, потом опять наверх. Шаг вперед, 2 шага вперед, шаг назад, а не 2 шага назад. Вот этот баланс главное всегда ощутить. Поэтому, when we talk about, also for English speakers, there are also some people that join us, when we talk about reforms, you should know that first of all, we should apply them very fast for people to see the results. The reform should be law enforcement, tax administration, transparency of government, change of attitude of government, judiciary for sure, but we should know that this will get long-term results. Now this thing with police will work very fast, with road inspection will work like overnight like this. More self-government, but also strong control of corruption and self-government, very important. And then what we do is just wait for the moment when, yes, you are right, some populists will come in and say, okay, well, these reforms are everything great, blah, 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 but now, you know, we'll fit. But one thing should be remembered also, that mentality changes. New generation is coming up. And Soviet generation is fading away. And what we are talking about is not only about incomes of the people, it's about mentality. And mentality was that the Soviet Union had this big, crazy promise that you don't have to work, we'll feed you. Well, of course they never did. But somehow it stayed in people's mind that that's what the unfulfilled promise of communism. That, of course, last time when they asked for to be fed, they were kept sent to Gulag. But now they think that, okay, good, there is no longer Gulag, but maybe, авось, вдруг. And that, эта программа сработала в стране. Я уверен был, что это сработает. Более того, я ничего не мог сделать против этого. А что можно сделать? Мы им говорили, что мы будете день и ночь работать, им превратимся в Сингапур, а они им говорили, что вы будете сидеть на диване, просто дайте нам ключ от квартиры, мы вам заполним холодильник. Они дали ключ от квартиры. Поэтому, но надо сидеть на этом диване некоторое время, чтобы понять, что сколько бы ты рот не открывал, тебя никто не будет кормить. И ничего тогда просто так не будет класть. И потом, может быть, они опять вернутся к тому, с чего мы начали. So.
I'll try to be very, very short, and we haven't touched something about the business. We tried to talk shortly about the taxation administration you just mentioned. What specifically did you make in order to refill your budget in the shortest term? Because we as a business right now, we're struggling a lot, and we can't imagine how can we help the government to refill the budget.
We cut our taxes by 60%. It was a big gamble. We introduced flat tax, and when we did it, actually, everybody said, IMF told us you're crazy. You cannot do it. We said, we don't take your advice, we do it. And 1 year later, they came and said, you were right. So it на грани фола it was, because you know, there were moments when we thought that budget is collapsing, but we still didn't waver on that. And that we cut budget, but we didn't waver on this finger tax cutting policy. And especially after the war, when we thought our budget will go to hell, again we gathered and we said, okay, we're again lowering taxes, again big gamble. And it didn't give the same fast results as last time, but it didn't go down. It still has a slight increase. So it's very important to find this, on the one hand, to find this balance. It's very important to keep overall tax burden of GDP low, because sometimes it's a very big temptation, when you, especially when incomes are working, and we went into this temptation that we had enough cash because of lack of corruption. You know, our tax rate decreased 60 times, and budget incomes in those terms, in absolute terms, went up 18 times. So that's the index of reduced corruption and legalization of economy. And so the temptation was, now we have all this new cash, let's build lots of new things. But then it's very important to blow the balance, because if you go over a certain amount, then it's a burden on the economy, even if it's clean and clear. And so from that standpoint, it's very important to, on the one hand, to cut corruption, cut red tape. I'm sure it will bring much higher tax income. I remember how Kuchma was doing. Kuchma would take it together with Azarov, by the way. He took all the Ukrainian businessmen, whoever was there, to the forest. Younger ones don't remember that. He said, you are not living in this forest until you pay taxes. Of course, this is circus. And that's what, but Azarov was considered to be like a really tough guy to be doing that. So, but the reality is that the way to do it is not through this kind of coercion, but to tell them that's the advantage. You know, you will not be molested every day by this police and that inspection and this. But this is clean rules of the game. Once you are stick by that, then nobody touches you. And after a very fast time, or a short time, business will see all the advantages, the beauty of this. And that's exactly what modern state is all about. I think the biggest change we made in Georgia was not police change or education, by the way, education should be a big reform. Our most corrupt sector was not police, was education. Bribes, the enders of university bribes when you move from one group to another. It's less in Ukraine, but also it's a factor in Ukraine. But anyway, biggest reform was tax reform. Because to get this mentality that you pay taxes and it's for society, for well-being, it's very hard for a post-Soviet person to understand. Of course, the Soviet Union was taxing very heavily, but they never acknowledged it. So it was, and they were telling, oh, we are going to do it for free. You're free, we're such benefactors. You don't get much, but it's for free. So that's, we are coming from very dark reality. So it's very important. And that was that, in the end, I think we were successful. People were paying taxes. And we had no problem. And in the end, what we did electronic filing, which said that you wouldn't really check. People would file their own taxes electronically, and it worked. Because burden was okay, and then it just, and I think the worst mistakes we made when we had real difficulties, when we would send in and crack down on tax on wrong payment, because that was really what scared business. In the end, somehow we found some kind of balance when, well, the way how we acted, I'll tell you. We told them, tax inspector is not your enemy. Tax inspector is there to help. So what we outsourced collecting of taxes to private companies. But we told them, if you don't want to be dealt with private companies that would keep share of the taxes, work with your tax inspectors, who are there just as business consultants. And so we told, and we changed this only last year, and I wish we had done it before, that tax inspectors were going out and telling them, look, we don't want you to go to these private firms, let's sit down and do it together. And you have grace period, you can make mistakes, we come back again, we do it again, and then somehow also tax inspectors develop this kind of partnership with business. It was psychological change. So there are many innovative models that you can apply in that to make people think that it's after all useful for their own sake. Yeah, you are.
У нас будут большие проблемы, если, скажем, Россия будет и дальше вмешиваться в нашу жизнь. Мы прекрасно понимаем, что пока у нас есть проблемы, пока Россия не занимается своими проблемами, она будет заниматься нашими. Я знаю, что уже сейчас в Украине создается группа информационщиков, которые понимают, что Россию надо перенаправить на решение своих внутренних вопросов. И я знаю о том, что уже обратились русские с помощью, чтобы мы помогли им технологиями. Как вы считаете, я думаю, что для Грузии это очень актуальный вопрос. Как вы считаете, чем мы можем помочь нашим русским братьям, которые хотят тоже жить в демократической стране?
У нас было телевидение в Грузии, ПИК, к сожалению, после выборов последних его закрыли. Но это телевидение занималось чем? Оно не было пропагандистским, как Russia Today. Она совершенно не показывала, что жизнь Грузии сладкая. Наоборот, она была очень критична по поводу грузинского правительства. Кстати, грузинское правительство финансировало. Но, конечно, любое правительство не любит что-то критиковать. Но для грузинского правительства какая была разница? Это было телевидение на русском. Так пусть себе на здоровье бы критиковали, и мы их финансировали, потому что все равно для грузинской аудитории, честно, если уж открыто отвечать, это не было большой проблемой. У нас все равно русскоязычные программы у нас не смотрели уж. Но они были обычным критическим телевидением, которое там всякие мерзкие вещи про меня рассказывало, и no problem. Но зато они тоже показывают разные аспекты жизни нашей страны, разные аспекты жизни России. У них было много корреспондентов. И это был обычный свободный канал, который очень балансированно освещал русские события, достаточно критические внутригрузинские события. И, в принципе, в России он быстро начал набирать темп. Это при всем то, что ресурсы русскоязычные наши были гораздо более ограничены, чем у вас. Конечно, о чем речь. Поэтому есть много методов. Я думаю, что есть новые технологии. Сейчас просто классический телевизионный модель не очень работает в Польше. Но вообще все это пространство очень быстро меняется. Мне очень понравилось, как украинцы написали это письмо. Это мне напомнило письмо запорожских казаков турецкому султану. Письмо украинцев к россиянам. Наверное, все смотрели, там, что мы, дорогие россияне, мы не знаем, что такое МКАД, мы не знаем ваших политиков, кроме там Жириновского, Медведева, Путина, мы не знаем то, все, так какого этого вы к нам лезете. Занимайте свои страны. И, в принципе, так оно и есть. Так что они каким-то образом, они считают, что центр вселенной, Новый Рим, Третий Рим. Они уже не центр вселенной давно. они центр проблем для нашего региона. Да, но обычные люди, которые ориентируются все больше на свои проблемы, правильно? Поэтому, да, я думаю, что первый, самый главный успех ваш будет развивать Украину. Все же. Я не думаю, что украинцы чисто пропагандистски смогут поменять what is Russian mindset, но если Украина быстро поменяется, просто надо об этом рассказывать россиянам. Рассказывать, кстати, многие россияне сами расскажут. Но и вы тоже должны рассказывать, должны в свою сторону, что вы делаете, почему вы делаете. В первую очередь, кстати, когда вы будете говорить через россиян, это будет легче разговаривать с Крымом, легче будет разговаривать с теми людьми на востоке и других местах Украины, которые там, допустим, Одесса, Николаеве, которые там считают, что там у них им что-то угрожает. Две больших вещей нам опять случилось. Первое. Русские обнаружили, что Украина отдельная страна. Мой старый друг Леонид Кучма написал книгу под этим сознанием, но если я прочитал ее, там ничего давно не написано, название это. И, в принципе, это хороший лозунг: Украина не Россия. Во-первых, это было очень важно, что они поняли, чего они не поняли, кстати, после оранжевой революции. Сейчас они наконец-то уразумели, засекли на ус, что это отдельная страна, во-первых. Во-вторых, что очень важно, этот миф о бендеровцах, фашистах и западенцах, все полностью испарился. Потому что эти люди, которые вот столько месяцев стояли на Майдане, и как бы они были, представляли, многие из них, запад Украины, они оказались совершенно нецивилизованные люди, которые не отрубали головы, их не собирали к себе карпатские леса там или куда-то.
Ну, все равно называют фашистами.
Нет, они будут называть кем угодно, но это уже никто не проглатывает. И, кстати, вот почему мы сделали, вот в Южной Осетии они кричали, что я делал геноцид и так далее, и российская пропаганда. Я выступал в 2008 году, когда они вторглись на нашу территорию, в CNN на следующий день, и вдруг под экраном я вижу линию. South Ossetia, 3000 people killed. Interfax. И вдруг начал у меня в глазах помутило, потому что я знал, что в этом маленьком городе Цхинваль, где всего населения было 7000 человек до этого, и которых полностью эвакуировали российские военные, не потому что они их жалели, просто там была одна узкая дорога, или танки должны были заходить, а если будет население бежало, то они бы застопорили по этой узкой горной дороге так. Поэтому они их забрали и эвакуировали за неделю до этого. Я знал, что там физически не могло быть 3000 человек. Где-то в глубине, а вдруг, черт его знает. Вдруг вы действительно случайно, как работала эта пропаганда. Потом, когда они уже все почитали, есть прекрасный фильм Некрасова, русского режиссера, супер фильм, документальный, он посчитал 190 с чем-то убитых, и ни одной женщины, ни одного ребенка. Все солдаты и боевики. Все молодого призывного или там 30-35 лет, и все мужского пола. Вышел на кладбище, просто все пересчитал и увидел, и не говоря о том, что потом вывезли в Россию. Там. Да, о чем я говорю? Вот это была пропаганда. Многие в Украине тоже поверили, что мы, Грузия, провоцировали, что российские каналы это все делали. Сейчас вы видели, сейчас они тоже говорят, что вы все провоцируете. Вы провоцируете. На Майдане вы провоцируете, и они говорят, да, мы раздаем паспорта, потому что они провоцируют. Я в 2008 году говорю, если сейчас Европа не проснется, следующая Украина. Я не оракул дельфский, чтобы это самое. Просто это очевидно, это настолько технологически так, что дальше некуда. Сначала маленького проглатываешь, потом большого проглатываешь, это так получается. У них сейчас новая линия такая. Путин считает, что Киев он не удержит. Его последнее заявление об этом говорит. Но он хочет линию такую сделать. Абхазия, Краснодар, потом дальше переходит в Крым, Одесса, Николаев, линия через Молдову, отрезать часть Молдовы, Приднестровье, вот тебе большая линия. И он скажет россиянам, ну ладно, я не удержал эту Украину строптивую, но я увеличил территорию России. Реально присоединил к ней вот целую линию вот такой на юге. Большая мечта прорыва на юг. Я думаю, что это не получится. Но это у них в мозгу, это вызовет большие проблемы.
Это мечта об украинско-грузинской сухопутной границе.
Да, вот я как раз результат какой будет, я могу в своих мечтах об этом, там, вы мечтали, там, что украинский президент рассказывал по-английски, я, конечно, у меня могут быть такие тоже вещи, но на самом деле, кстати, Сочи, это Сочи исторически связано было с нашей страной территориально, с моей страной. Но и Сочи это грузинское имя вообще-то, это Терево называется по-грузински. Но и там население большое, пока их не выгнали, большая часть была грузин, Латвия, окрестность. Но почему, о чем я говорю, что и у них есть эти сумасшедшие планы, потому что вы должны понимать, что он западник. Поэтому надо быть очень осторожным. Но я думаю, что это 21 век, это 90-е годы, совершенно другая ситуация. Да, в Крыму сейчас какие-то движения начались, но там нет реально сепаратистских больших лидеров сейчас, поэтому русские пытаются прямо там быть. Там есть большой минус, что российская военная база, но это ближе к Европе.
15 тысяч населения вышло на митинг в Крыму по отделу Крыма от Украины. Понимаете, вчера вам сообщили информацию. Как вы говорите, что нет?
Нет, я не говорю, что нет. Я говорю, что там большие проблемы. Я не считаю, что там необратимые проблемы. Я уверен, что они будут делать это. Я уверен, что там это план Б полностью сейчас задействован. Никаких иллюзий по этому поводу у меня сейчас нет. Но еще раз говорю, это территория ближе к Европе. Если в Украине будет быстрое, эффектное правительство и народ займется реформами, нелегко Украину сломать, свернуть шею даже в Крыму. Будет крайне сложно. И это может быть вообще... Я говорю, что Российская империя как идея прекратила свое существование на Майдане, точно, потому что Евразийский союз испарился, сгорел в огне Майдана, правда. Gone. No more Eurasian. Но сейчас вторая мечта, да? Территориальная экспансия. Вот я думаю, что Украина, по моему мнению, прогноз положит конец этому. Потому мы сейчас одержимы все Украиной. Моя страна живет в Украине, мои 5 миллионов сограждан, независимо от политических взглядов, просто одержимы Украиной. Ладно, последний вопрос.
Главную ошибку, которую вы допустили в процессе реформ, и, возможно, чего стоит Украине? Вот
главная ошибка, которую мы допустили, если допустить это тактически, то, чтобы быстро не реформировать, какие-то вещи откладывать. Каждый раз, когда мы что-то отложили, потом практически невозможно было вернуться к этому. Это во-первых. Надо делать все быстрее, вместе, с самого начала. Это очень важно. Не откладывать, того не обидеть, того не обидеть. Долгий ящик для реформы, это все ключ, ты никогда не найдешь. Это первое. И второе. Главная ошибка, что мы недооценили, мы много инвестировали в образование, но просто надо все было отменить, все бросить в образование. Это основное, потому что избавление от советской ментальности, это, я думаю, украинцы потрясающе образованный народ, в целом, среднестатистически больше, чем любые из наших народов, но здесь нужна десоветизация ментальности. Есть тут и, кстати, уже высшие учебные вузы, когда это происходит, но в целом по всей стране, особенно в каких-то регионах, массово их. Во-первых, вывести за границу учиться и завести профессоров, в том числе украинских, которых полно на Западе, их и преподавать. Потому что, в конце концов, образование ключ к будущему. Новое поколение ключ будущего, это новое поколение скоро зависит от образования. Это сейчас, и результат этого будет через 5, 7, 8, 10 лет. Но у нас было 10 лет. Я очень жалею, что мы первый же год не начали. Потому что 10 лет достаточно, чтобы качественный скачок был в этом секторе, и тогда уже очень трудно будет. Потому что в любом случае образованное поколение, даже если оно не в большинстве, то есть по-новому образованное поколение, оно будет иметь моральные и другие преимущества. И они все равно будут, возьмут вверх под конец. Я думаю, что сейчас. И сейчас это уже, потому что при демократии, знаете, любой правительство думает, что будет через 6 месяцев. Вот сейчас, поскольку это будет, опять революционное правительство. Революционное правительство имеет роскошь какие-то вещи сделать, может быть, на 10 лет. Не дайте им этого не делать, не дайте им заниматься мелкотней и своими мелкими этими интересами, мелкими успехами хотя бы. Нужны большие перемены, большие успехи, я так считаю. Наверное, на этом...
Thank you very much. It was very inspirational and somewhat practical. I want to, many people asked me on Facebook and many people here would support. We want to offer you a job. Wow. On behalf of Ukrainian people, of the new Ukrainian generation of people you have seen here, and many hundreds and thousands of people who couldn't come, who are not in Kiev, Would you like to work for Ukraine part-time, no salary, and as a consultant?
Well, first of all, I need salary, and because I never stole any money. I need in life generally, so I will be very blunt. But B, I don't need to work in Ukraine. I with my heart with Ukraine. I think Ukrainians should work for Ukraine. I think Ukrainians, nobody can, no advisor, no hired manager. Because I was told by many Ukrainians, I got lots of job offers starting from very, very high official positions, like for people in Maidan, and starting from you should be our paid advisor, or now even demoted to our paid advisor. The reality is that I tell everybody, nobody can give you blueprints and nobody can teach you unless it's in your heart. Everything I'm talking about is not complicated and difficult. Everything I'm talking about is you should be in your heart, and when it's in your heart, you do it. Nothing theoretically very complicated about it. And one big advice I have: get rid of many advisors. Now we'll have army. European Union is giving 20 billion euros. They will send you 20 million advisors, or 2 million. Armies of advisors to be paid by those euros. Limit their number to minimum, please. You cannot get rid of all of them because they will get offended, but don't allow them to abuse your time. Time is a big commodity. You don't have it. Don't have it like 100 years. Like you need to listen to your own heart, to your own people, and then only to advisors, even to maybe competent advisors. From that respect, I'm just one of you. There's my friend Rafael Glucksmann, who is a good advisor. He was, but it's true. My response is like that. It's not complicated, guys. There are so simple things. Everything I told you, I cannot tell you even more than that. It's basically I told you everything.
Okay.
And you just do it. You just do it.
Mr. President,
wow.
We have from memories from the Fulbright.
Green is color of renovation. That's what you need here.
Президент Saakashvili не буде змінювати Україну. Гарно, що ви слухали, але насправді але насправді все залежить від нас. Тому, якщо маєте бажання, я вас запрошую ще буквально 15
Що? Серйозно? Я не знаю.
Люди, хтось сфотографуйте мене з президентом.
Дякую.
Виривається до вас.